Well, good evening, everyone. Oh, you know what? I knew I forgot something. Like literally, you would not have been able to hear me. Hang on, guys. When I say that I'm sliding in here at the last second, it's not a joke. It's literally the truth, and that is what's going on here. Anyway, hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of Late Night Coffee Talk. For those of you joining us for the first time, I'm Daniel Miller, president of the Texas Nationalist movement, and this is that time once a week where I take a break from working on independence, pour yet another cup of coffee, and I fire up the cameras and answer your questions, right? We talk about whatever's on your mind, whether it's about TEXIT, the TNM, Texas politics, Texas culture. I mean, whatever it is, right? Whatever's on your mind, you get a chance to ask me the questions. And I try to get to as many as I possibly can. And if you're wondering how you ask those questions, it is quite simple. If you're watching on YouTube, be sure to drop your question in the chat. And while you're there, be sure to like and subscribe and hit that notification bell. And of course, channel memberships are available, right? They are open, and we got a whole passel of them that I'm going to thank here a little bit later in the live stream. But want to thank you guys so much for supporting our content, supporting our work to get the word out, especially those of you that have signed up for YouTube channel memberships. So you can drop your question there in the chat and make that dog hunt, and it'll get all aggregated. And be sure to chat with your fellow TNMers, right? Your fellow Texans, your fellow inquirers, even whoever it is. Just, engage in the community. If you're watching on X, right, all you got to do is drop your question right there in the chat, right next to the video. Same thing. It winds up over here, and we get it added to the queue. If you are watching on Facebook, while you're there, be sure to like and share, but also be sure to drop your question in the comments underneath the video. And, same thing. They go in the same batch. So if you are not wanting to just dump your business all out there in the chat, then you have another option. And I think it may be at the bottom of the screen right now, right? Somewhere around here. You can shoot your question via email to coffeetalk@vtnm.org, which many of you have already done. Some of you like to get your questions in early. And interestingly enough, I gotta say, a lot of the questions that have come in today all are around a certain topic that I have, frankly, talked about ad nauseum. And so I'm spending some time here trying to determine whether I want to answer it yet one more time, or just direct everyone to the resources. So let me wrestle with that decision myself. But look, guys, be sure to get your questions in. Tonight may be a little bit of a shorty. I have got a raging headache, and so I'm here for as long as I can be here. I'll make it through the whole hour, but I may be a little testier than usual. So just bear with me, okay? So while we wait for you guys to get some of these questions in the chat, I saw that. I'll wait for some more questions to come in on the chat. Let's start taking some of these bad boys. Wow, man, you guys really tore up the email today. Holy smokes. Yeah, this is pretty wild here. So give me one sec, and these things make me these things. I'm trying to like I said, I'm trying to make a determination here whether I'm going to answer the same question. Those of you who have seen me do Q&As for years or seen these late night coffee talks probably know what it's all about. Yeah. Okay, this is from Michael. It's not even a question. Michael says, after Trump's presidency and the left attempts to regain power, what happens then? For some strange reason, I feel like Trump's reelection is a setback for Texas independence. Although I feel he's trying to fix the federal government, things will remain the same. Texas independence is our only option. You should run for governor. You have my vote. Okay, so what I can tell you, Michael, first off, thank you for sending this in. Thank you for your vote of confidence, I guess. I am not going to run for governor, but I appreciate that I would at least have one vote. Well, two, because I would probably vote for myself. My wife is probably a little on the fence as to whether she would vote for me or not, right? That's a joke, by the way. Here's what I would say to your first point about the Leffert, the Leffert game. I would tell you to go back and watch last week's coffee talk. I really tore off into that one last week, so I would just recommend you go check that one out. Let's see what we got here. Okay, why does this one feel familiar? Maybe I'm recycling. Hang on, let me get up here. Okay, yeah, I covered a lot of this. Okay, so everyone who asked about the Islamic communities and sort of the infiltration, I'm going to refer you back to last week. Talked about that. That was one of the questions last week. So I just knocked several of these out of the boat, right? So just go back on our YouTube channel, look at last week's, and you'll see the answer to that. Okay, let's see. Literally, okay. So let me address this one. So Connie, you actually asked this same question about cartel territory. I think it was last week or week before. Already answered it. Go watch the replay. Okay, Don, here we go. Here's a question. I'm concerned about what happens after a successful plebiscite that approves the exit of Texas from the USA. Okay, so let me just pause for Don real quick. Don, thank you for using the word plebiscite. That makes me very happy because you cannot imagine when we had the very first draft of the referendum bill, right? The TEXIT bill, whatever you want to call it, the very first draft had the word plebiscite in it, and you cannot, well, maybe you can. You cannot imagine how many times, and even to legislators, we had to explain what the word plebiscite meant. So the fact you used it makes me very happy. So we had to change the language for the legislation because we got tired of having to explain it. But anyway, thanks for using it. Don goes on to say specifically, I am concerned that the same thing that happened in 1861 will repeat itself. Has there been any discussion about convening an Article 5 convention before the secession occurs? Well, these are two very different things, right? So let me just break down what you're asking here. So your concern is 1861, which is, I'm guessing, the outbreak of a civil war and the federal government attacking. We have addressed that in a lot of depth, a lot of depth. There is a very detailed article on TexianPartisan.com. Just go search for it. That deals specifically with that and debunking this myth somehow that in the 21st century we're going to have a repeat of something that happened in the 19th century, and why it's impractical. We probably ought to turn it into a daggum ebook that's downloadable. I mean, I'll be honest with you, because people still talk about that, but there are a lot of reasons. Honestly, I could take up an hour talking about why that will not occur, why this is not 1861. However, doing what we are doing is the way to avoid a repeat of something similar to 1861. Okay. But the other aspect of your question deals with this idea of an Article 5 convention ahead of Texas withdrawing from the Union. And I think it's important to make a distinction here that these are really two different paths. You want to talk about Article 5 convention, you're talking about convention of the states versus secession, which technically what we're doing is not secession. It is a withdrawal of our membership from a supranational body Not to split hairs, but it is not technically by definition secession unless you use the very archaic definition of the word secession. Okay. But that being said, you're looking at two very different processes. And if you're looking at an Article 5 convention, what that's saying is you're trying to effectively fix what's wrong with the Union by calling a convention of states to amend or change the Constitution, when we have to remember that it's it's those same states, many of them, that are the reason that the federal system is broken, right? So, imagine, I mean, do you want the Constitution opened up right now when you have states that effectively don't believe that you have a right to keep and bear arms, or that you don't have freedom of speech or freedom of religion, that are totally okay with violating your right against illegal search and seizure? I mean, these are things that are happening in other states, right, where they believe in this sort of supreme executive, or they want to devolve even further. So you have to ask yourself, when you're considering an Article 5 convention, and then look, I don't want the hate mail. I've had these debates and arguments before, and it's just not what we do, right? But you have to be willing, when you open up Pandora's box, which would be an Article 5 convention, you have to be ready and willing to deal with whatever the consequences of that are on the other side. And if all of a sudden we don't have a electoral college, or don't even have a Senate, right? Are you willing for that to take place? Because there seems to be this feeling among a lot of people that advocate for the Article 5 convention that it's going to break their way on things like a balanced budget. And you have these people that say, well, wait a minute, we'll have this Article 5 convention. It'll be very limited, right? We're going to do this balanced budget amendment to the Constitution, and that's all that it's for. Well, I want you to just go back in history and realize that when they were going to have a convention to meet to deal with some of the challenges that they had with the Articles of Confederation, that convention basically took the Articles of Confederation, wadded it up, and threw it in the trash, and drafted a whole new document. They exceeded their brief. They created a whole new union, right? Literally a completely different entity. They created that, and it was a runaway. They exceeded their brief. And so don't think that it can't happen. You might say that the call could be limited, but can it really? Once you open that box, you have to be ready, and you have to be willing to accept whatever the consequences are. And you have to accept that it's not going to, it could very well not break your way. Whereas this other process, what we're pursuing is our destiny, right? It's the destiny of Texas to be a self-governing independent nation. Ultimately, an Article 5 convention presupposes the federal system can be fixed. And those that are advocating for Texas independence know that whether it can or cannot is completely irrelevant to the fact that Texas would be more prosperous, more secure. We would have far more opportunity. We would be much stronger if we were to stand as a self-governing independent nation among nations and not have to worry about that federal nonsense anymore. So that being said, I think it's super important not to conflate those two, right? Not one is not tied to the other. They're very different things. It's a oil and water situation, okay? But anyway, Don, thank you very much for that question. All right, let's get over here and look in the chat. Hey, thank you for the super chat. Chris Powell says, Daniel, what do you think about Steve Toth running for Congress now? You don't think he will turn against us now? He seems more friendly to the cause, even more the last 2 years than 4 years ago when he was an original signer. Yeah. So, funny story, right? Anyway, thank you for the super chat, Chris. Look, I have made it people ask me all the time to endorse. I mean, it's happening right now. Getting pounded left and right to personally endorse. Okay, candidates and at all levels. And my policy has been at the helm of the TNM to never personally endorse a candidate. And the reason being is, regardless of whether there's a distinction or differentiation made about, well, I'm doing this in my personal capacity. Look, there is no separating me personally from the cause of the TNM. I mean, I jaywalk and the organization gets blamed for it, right? So I don't personally endorse. Now, do I donate to candidates? Absolutely. Have I volunteered personally for candidates and knocked the door, made phone calls? Absolutely, I've done that. But making a public personal endorsement is just not in the cards for any of these candidates. Even somebody like Steve, who, he and I go back a very long time, and I absolutely love me some Steve Toth. He and I get along. We've been friends for, gosh, man. I mean, I think probably 12, 14 years now, somewhere in that ballpark. It's been a while. And so I'll tell you guys sort of the conversation that I had with him back when he ran for Congress the last time. And if you don't remember, Steve was in the Texas House, and after redistricting, they drew we got a new congressional district, and there was some shuffling around. Steve decided to do very much what he's doing right now, which is leave the House and run for Congress. And he came over and he sat down at the office, and we talked about this. And I know Steve won't mind me sharing this. But we talked about him running for Congress. He's like, I really would love the support of the TNM. And I said, I would love to be able to support you. I like you. I think you've been good. We've been able to work together in the Texas House, but you got to understand that's federal. We don't do federal. And so, there was some conversation, and it's been some debates, been some criticism on us for many years. Why don't you guys do any of the federal stuff? Well, there's a couple of very important reasons, right? Number one, it's a matter of principle, right? We don't. It's kind of like much like how Sinn Féin won't. They'll get members elected to Parliament in Westminster in the UK, but they won't actually seat them, right? They won't even go take their seats. Not equating us with Sinn Féin, but sometimes it's a matter of principle. Look, we don't want to be entangled with them, which kind of takes me to the second reason, and it's really a practical one. By not being involved in federal politics, it lessens our organizational entanglements with the federal system. For us to do that, we'd have to create a whole new entity to interact with federal politics. We have to create a federal level PAC. We'd have to deal with the Federal Election Commission. All of a sudden, we have different infrastructure we have to spin up for contributions for that. And I mean, it's just too much. And honestly, I would rather these guys not go off to DC. I mean, granted, until TEXIT is a reality, it does us good to have strong people in Washington, D.C., fighting against whatever DC is going to do. But let's understand this, is it's kind of an exercise in futility. How many good guys have we sent off to the Washington, D.C. sausage grinder only to, see that they're frustrated, that they can't get anything done, that the priority becomes federal politics and not representing the state. Now, I'm not saying that's what would happen with Steve, but I'm saying we've seen it time and time and time again. The federal system is terminally broken. And so I would rather see people like Steve, while, I would, let me just say on a personal level, I would love nothing more than to watch him absolutely embarrass Dan Crenshaw. I mean, Dan Crenshaw is like so terrible, right? When it comes to issues that are important to Texas and Texans, he's definitely not a Texas first kind of guy. But I would love to see Steve here, fighting for us here in Texas, fighting for us to get a vote on independence, to fight to push back the federal government. And some may say the wisdom is that, he can go up there and kind of try to fight those entanglements too. But it's a far different fight up there. So, I don't do personal endorsements, and I'm sad to see Steve leave the House when we need to be adding to our numbers instead of subtracting from them. But I wish him absolutely the best of luck because Steve is, in the end, a friend, not just of me personally, but of the TNM and of our mission and what we're doing. So anyway, Chris, thank you for that question, and thank you for your super chat. Okay. Let's see here. Let's see what we got. Oh, man. Okay, so Zach emailed in 3 questions, and so normally I'll just pluck out one and deal with it, or you get the lightning round, and I think I'm going to lightning round your 3 questions, Zach. So he says, "What if we win the referendum yet the federal government doesn't recognize its validity?" It's irrelevant. At the end of the day, if they don't recognize the validity, there are other factors in play that actually affect them far more than it does us. We will continue to press for our rights under Article 1, Section 2, under the 10th Amendment. We would continue to press for those. We would continue to act because we have the will of the people, a mandate of the body politic, because this presupposes that we win the vote, right? So when you have that mandate, it's like Dr. Kortrup has said previously, even when governments treat them as not legally binding, they're politically binding. And so there are a lot of negative impacts for the federal government if they decide to go down that route, and that would just be up to them, right? But we're going to do what we're supposed to do. We're going to follow the will of the people. Article 1, Section 2, okay? And so number 2, what would the backing of our monetary system be if we become independent? You mean when we become independent? And that will be entirely up to the people of Texas post TEXIT. But I think there's already been strong indicators that Texans want sound money. The transactional gold bill that just passed, and they say transactional gold, but I mean it's really precious metals in the depository. But it's that effectively establishes a proto currency for Texas, and that's one of a kind, first of its nation sort of thing, with our own depository and our own currency. So I think Texans have given a pretty clear indication of where they want to go with their monetary system, but the ultimate shape of that will be determined post independence by people just like you, Zach. So the question is, what kind of currency do you want? What do you want the currency backed by? Number 3, what's our strategy for maintaining a peaceful secession without provoking federal retaliation? Keeping it peaceful, following the law, in so much as the law is not violative of our conscience or does not commit violence upon our people. I mean, that's just the bottom line. That is a peaceful legislative process. All political powers inherent in the people. We have a path to do this peacefully. And this is why we very much stress following the process. You cannot be provocatively violent, right? You just can't. It derails the process. You have to keep the main thing. You have to follow the process. And in doing so, you eliminate their opportunities to have any reason whatsoever to come in and just absolutely drop the hammer down. So we follow the law. We've even as ridiculous as it is, we go above and beyond in many cases. The team can tell you here that we wring our hands over crossing T's and dotting I's because God knows that if you give the federals an opportunity to strangle a movement our size, they would absolutely do it. They would just burn us to the ground if they had an opportunity. So, we don't trust them, and as such, we have to do everything to be straight up, above board, super transparent, very clear about what we're going to do. We have to take a very hard line. Our code of conduct is one of the strictest in any organization of our type whatsoever, and we have people that are registered supporters in the organization that are, I don't say regularly, it happens less often than you might think, but people that violate the code of conduct, and they are proscribed from the organization. They cannot ever join. They cannot ever be associated. They cannot attend our meetings. I mean, we're serious about it. So This is ultimately our strategy: is take the question, take it to the people, let the people have their say in it, and then continue on through the process. Does that mean that the federal government will behave? Absolutely not. But I would refer you back to my statements about the 1861 a while ago and go back and look for that article on the Texian Partisan, or look through previous episodes of Late Night Coffee Talk, where I've really unpacked that issue a lot. It's true. Okay. All right. So this is from Andrea. Oh, hey, Andrea. I know you. Andrea says, how can TEXIT actually happen when we have Abbott and the radical Texas Congress in power, especially because they can rig the elections? I'm not too hopeful this will actually happen. Well, I'm sorry you're not too hopeful. I'm hopeful every morning when I wake up, because I understand that the power of people and numbers can overcome those sorts of things. Abbott won't be there forever. He does not wield absolute power. And the idea that they can rig elections means that we should really be concentrating on A, legislation that ensures election integrity, or B, flooding the zone with volunteers to make it impossible for them to do so, or I guess technically C, flooding the vote so that we overwhelm with enough yes votes to overcome any type of algorithmic manipulation that occurs, right? So all of those three scenarios involve people just like us, me, you, Andrea, everybody else watching, getting involved, doing something, pouring time and energy and resources into this fight. That's what it requires. None of those three scenarios will ever happen if people are passive, if they just kind of sit back and say, you know what, I'm just going to let everybody else do it. Or they say, you know what, I've lost hope and therefore I'm going to do nothing. And whatever's going to happen is going to happen. Well, you can be sure that unless the political power is exercised by the people, then TEXIT will never happen. And therefore, the status quo, which is a myth, there is no status quo, but the course that we are on will continue to deviate farther and farther until, honestly, there's no chance whatsoever, right? I mean, as long as a remnant is here, maybe a generation or two down the road that understand the reality that it takes. You can't get crops without working the fields. Same thing is true with independence. You don't get independence without work. Kara is very fond of saying that independence is achieved, it is not received. True, our work will benefit those people that decided that they wanted to sit on their thumbs during this fight. And so for some of those people that it is, but it can't be for everyone. I was had a call from one of the state reps last night, heading back to Austin to get ready for that special session. And what I reminded him of was that story, that stat that just, when I first read it many, many, many years ago, it just floored me, right? And it was that from the time of the start of the Texas Revolution to the victory at San Jacinto, there was about a 60% attrition rate. Read that as desertion rate. People that signed up to fight and then left, just walked off. So Texas was never able to muster its full strength on the battlefield. It's part of the reason the runaway scrape happened, is because Houston had too few men, and definitely those that he had were not very well trained. And he had to take the time to bring them into somewhat of a cohesive fighting force that even remotely stood a chance and have favorable conditions. I literally had this conversation with somebody the other day. But anyway, this is what it takes. You look at that 60%, that's 60% that deserted. I mean, that doesn't even take into account the people that didn't even bother to donate to the cause or to fight or to give supplies or whatever, just fighting men on the field. 60% said, I'm in, and then they just left before the thing was even over with. So, you can still win. You still can. But man, just imagine what it would have been like. I mean, South Texas, had the Texians been able to fully, like, if everyone who signed up in the Texans, if everyone had participated, maybe, instead of South Texas being Brownsville, being the southernmost tip of Texas, maybe it would have been Mexico City, or we probably would have called it Texaco City, right? But it's not the way it worked out. Worked out the way it was supposed to. Thank you for your question, Andrea. Let's see here. Bob wants to know, when can we get this question on the ballot? You have your opportunity to get the question on the ballot, and this gets down to a process situation. You got to have legislation that enacts the vote. So that means you're either going to get a bill passed during a regular session, or you're going to press the governor to call a special session and get it done. Okay, so that means that you're tied to the legislative cycle here in Texas, which is every other year. The legislature meets for 140 days. And in that 140 days, they pass bills or they do not. You get the bill passed then according to the letter of the bill, the vote would be the November after the legislative session. Your other opportunity is a special session. If you could pressure the governor to make it happen, then he could call a special session and call them to vote on it. So, that's what you're looking at. So, when can we get this question on the ballot? When, as I told Andrew, when enough people step forward and want to participate. Look, we all share the same vision here. We're just here to help you as an organization, help you achieve that vision. But that, again, Article 1, Section 2, all political powers inherent in the people. It's not all political powers inherent in the process or a piece of paperwork or a single person. All political powers inherent in the people, which means that we all must do something to help advance this cause, to help us bring about the number of voters in a cohesive, organized, disciplined fashion for the purpose of securing that vote, not just getting the vote, but winning the vote, and after winning the vote, securing the independence. That's what it's going to take. So when can we? That's entirely up to the people of Texas. We do everything we can to facilitate that every single solitary day. But when the people are ready, that's exactly when it's going to happen. And it will happen no sooner than that, nor any later than that. Okay, let's get over here to email. This is going to be a fun one. You guys are submitting questions in threes tonight. This is quite interesting. Okay, this is from George. George says, economically speaking, how can Texas, a net receiver of federal funds, compensate for this revenue? Well, George, that is a major misconception. Texas is not a net receiver of federal funds. Texas overpays anywhere from $103 to $160 billion annually. Now, that's an average, right? But the other thing to bear in mind is the federal government is not only taking that money out of our pocket, they take it, goes to Washington, D.C., they shave off about 40% of it, and then they send about 60% back to us with strings attached, right? It says you must spend it in these ways, which those ways involve typically matching funds from the state. So all these program dollars they throw in, that all requires matching funds from the state. So the state now has to dip into your pocket a second time to match up that dollar from Washington, D.C., to be able to implement it in a program that is probably structured inefficiently and that maybe Texans don't even want, right? So that's the reality of it. So we're not some net receiver. And even if we were, how much of that money comes from debt that they're borrowing under your name and your children's name and grandchildren's name, right? So that's a whole other discussion that we can have. So the bottom line here is that, how do we compensate for the revenue? Well, the first thing we do is we get the thief out of our pocket, which is the federal government. All that money stays here, and then Texans get to determine they can spend according to their priorities, right? If we want to spend it on border security, we can spend it on border security. If we want to spend it on our schools, we can spend it on our schools. If we want to reduce our tax burden, excuse me, which I'm pretty sure Texans want to do, you have the ability to do that. The bottom line is the amount that we overpay on average is enough that we could totally eliminate property taxes immediately and still have a surplus, right? So this is the kind of economics that we're dealing with when it comes to the federal government stealing from us, taking from our pockets. And then, I mean, people say, well, how are we going to operate without federal money? Well, we're going to do a lot better. I mean, that's, we're talking about going from probably the 8th largest economy in the world to the 5th. If we can just get the robbers out of our pockets, those federal parasites, right? So, number 2, would Texas lease military bases to the federal government? Probably not. I've talked about this on previous live streams before. I've laid out the various scenarios. This kind of comes in the 4th stage post-TEXIT referendum, right? We have to deal with constitutional issues, statutory issues, international covenants, treaties, and agreements, and negotiated issues with the federal government. That land, at the moment that the referendum comes back successful, that land belongs to Texas. That is our property at that point. And, Texas will have use of it for its own military. And Texas may decide to execute a mutual defense compact with the United States and what's left of it. We don't know. But ultimately, that will be Texas property. So will we lease it back to the federal government? Probably not. Texas will operate it as military base for its military, and perhaps as part of a mutual defense compact, right, with the United States. So number 3 already dealt with. Will Texas create its own gold-backed currency or continue to use the U.S. dollar? Texas doesn't have to adopt its own currency. It can use the U.S. dollar as a bridge currency, even without the United States federal government's permission, in something called an informal currency union. But Texas is already taking steps through the transactional gold bill to establish its own currency. And when it goes into effect and the program is fully implemented, Texas will, for all intents and purposes, have its own gold-backed currency. And that's a huge deal. I mean, that's massive. I cannot tell you how massive that is. For those of you who are wondering what I'm talking about with this transactional gold bill, go look on our YouTube channel or on Spotify or Apple Podcasts. You will find a podcast episode dedicated specifically to that piece of legislation, and it'll give you all the details. But super cool. But anyway, we're well on our way. And oddly enough, I'm still getting the currency question after the passage of the transactional gold bill at the same rate that I was getting it before the passage of the transactional gold bill. And I thought for sure that question would begin to taper off and disappear, but apparently not. Okay. Hey, a reminder, I should not be doing this. I should not be asking for more questions because I got more than I can say grace over here. But if you're just now joining us late, if you need to get your question in, you can drop your question in the chat on our YouTube channel. While you're there, like and subscribe and hit the notification bell. Additionally, explore channel membership. We'd love to have your support there. You do like Chris Powell did a moment ago and do a super chat. Either way works out. You can also leave your question on the chat on the video where we're streaming on X. You can leave it in the comments on the Facebook page where this is streaming as well. And, we're doing triage over here. Okay, let's go here. John says, can the Maybe We'll Rise opening song be made available for download? That is in the works, John. That's in the works. I'm going to tell you, outside of the Social Security question, we get this asked a lot. And for those of you who don't know, maybe you missed the intro of this thing, but when we fire up the stream, there's a screen that we put up that says we're starting soon, and there's a song that plays. And people have sent us tons of messages wanting that song. They want us to put it on Spotify, or they want us to offer it for sale for a donation. They want us to make it available somehow. And so that is in the works. So I'm shocked. I'm shocked. But yes, you were about to get access to that song. Or, if you like it, you can just go listen to the intros of oh, you know what? I realized we cut that off when these things post. We have to chop that part of it off, the intro part. I got it. Okay. So anyway, once it's done, you'll know. All right, here we go. But thanks for the question, John. Let's see what we got here. Okay, Gage says, do the successes of Alberta and Saskatchewan reflect on our nationalist efforts? It's a good question. Um, Look, this has been my contention all along, is that success, and sometimes not even success, sometimes even just the good old college try on the whole self-determination front, no matter where it is, for the most part, is helpful for everyone. I say this a lot, and it's cliche. I mean, I know it's cliche, but I say it a lot. But it's especially true when it comes to self determination, and that is a rising tide raises all ships. I mean, this is why we offer our support to a lot of these independence movements. Whether it's advice or technical help or whatever it is, because their successes are helpful to us, much like when Scotland and when the Scottish referendum happened, or Brexit. Those things were very beneficial to us. So you will find in a lot of these, and this is some inside baseball for you, you will find that in a lot of these movements, there's this the two wolves fighting each other inside each movement, and it's one wolf is very cloistered. We don't need anyone. We got this. Anybody who offers a helping hand is we don't need you, which is great. I mean, that's an independent spirit, right? You want that, but then the other wolf that fights with that particular wolf is the one where they don't know the landmines, right? So they, on one hand, they need help. They acknowledge it. They want exposure. That's the other wolf, is the exposure. They want other people to know about what they do, but they don't want any advice from anybody else, right? Because they got this. So these two things, these two competing ideas, really fight. And we've seen it in independence movements that we've tried to help. We've seen varying degrees of acceptance of the help. There's healthy, I think, skepticism or suspicion, because frankly they don't run into people that are as nice as we are on the regular. But we've been fortunate to build relationships with many of these independence movements. Many of the independence movements that we studied before we launched the Texas Nationalist movement, we are still in contact with today and have learned a tremendous amount from them. And we try to pass that along in the things that we have learned in this journey. I mean, any of you that have any doubt, I mean, you're part of a movement that is spoken of worldwide, that's looked at as an inspiration by other independence movements. It is. And if you don't believe me, go ask other independence movements, right? They look to us. And so we love it when we see that success, right? When we see what's happening in Alberta. And the reason being is the number one, I guess the number one enemy for independence movements is always self-doubt, right? I mean, you can hear it when you talk to the opposition. Texas could never make it as an independent nation. They say that sort of stuff all the time. It'll never happen. You hear all that kind of naysaying, that hand wringing, that self-doubt, and that defeatist mentality. You hear it all the time. And so every independence movement in their formative stages, right, even up until almost the time of the referendum, that is one of their greatest enemies, is defeating the self-doubt of people on the issue of self-government. I mean, you have to look when Brexit, well, not Brexit, when polling was done for the Scottish independence referendum, right before they called the referendum, their polling numbers were in the low 30%, and they still called the referendum. That meant that there were a lot of people in Scotland that had a tremendous amount of self-doubt. Brexit, I mean, I think I've got a chart somewhere. I didn't even think I probably should have uploaded it on here a long time ago, but Brexit polling was in the toilet almost. One of the reasons that David Cameron called for the Brexit vote was because he thought there was not a snowball's chance in hell that the Brexit side would win because the polling was so low. And it was a massive case of national self-doubt. How could we ever exist without the European Union? And it's like, don't you guys remember you existed before the European Union? Right? It's sort of that thing. And so we get it here in Texas. I'm sure they hear it in California. I know they hear it in Alaska. They hear it in New Hampshire. And I know that they're hearing that stuff in Alberta. I mean, I know they are. Because they all do. All self-determination movements do it. And so the biggest enemy is typically our own people before you get to any of the bad guys out there, the bad actors that are trying to spike you and cut your legs out from under you. The first thing is that the people within, that self-doubt. And so, seeing the success of Alberta and Saskatchewan, seeing them make progress, seeing Nuevo Leon in Mexico make progress, even though it's not making the news here as much as it is, to see California, even though policy-wise they are probably nearly 180 degrees opposite, generally speaking, in California than we are, but to see them making progress and, having these smaller wins. These are all helpful to us because it is just that proof that is needed for people when they say it can't be done. We can look at them and say it's being done. When they tell us, well, you'll never get independence here in Texas. Well, it's happening. We're TEXIT is not an act. TEXIT is a process, and it's happening. Anybody who thinks that TEXIT can happen needs to just open their eyes and realize it's happening right now. It's not an overnight process, but it is happening. That decoupling, that, preparing to withdraw our membership from the union, it's happening. And so, salute to Alberta and Saskatchewan and all the other self-determination movements out there that are having successes. Don't let self-doubt and defeatism be the stumbling block to your self-government. All right. Where are we at? We got about 13 minutes. So, yep, there's that question. Okay, yep. Let me take this one before I address the bushel basket of the other ones. Kimberly asks, what good are property taxes and how can we, the people of Texas, people of the great state of Texas, eliminate them? I don't think our money should go to Hollywood nor anything else that goes against our conscience and our Constitution. Okay, Kimberly, let me just say this. I agree. And I think the vast majority of Texans agree with you. Property taxes are bad and they should be eliminated. I've gone so far as to say that I believe that the property tax is on par immoral as the federal income tax. I think not just the federal, just income tax period. I think income taxes and property taxes are absolutely 100% immoral, right? And yet we here in Texas, we get this come along from these politicians in Austin all the time. Well, we're going to give you property tax relief. Well, it doesn't fit. Nobody feels relieved because as long as we're having to pay money to the government to keep them from taking our property, then we are tenants and not owners. We are renting from these people. And there is no person that worse to rent from than the ultimate slumlord, and that's government, right? Especially when it's the right of every free person, right? If you want to, we talk about how this is a free country and we're all free, and land ownership goes hand in hand in the ability to purchase land and own land and hold land goes hand in hand. And that's not saying, renting is bad. I mean, there's, I'm not getting into that. But what I am saying is that land ownership and the ability to own and hold that land is a hallmark of freedom. It's a benchmark of freedom. And as long as we have to pay somebody else for the right to own, use, and maintain possession of our land, we are nothing more than tenants, right? It's literally the new feudalism, is what it is, right? And so, we have to do this, right? We have to no longer tolerate this nonsense from politicians, these electeds in Austin, who tell us they're going to give us property tax relief when we are demanding that they eliminate property taxes. And people will come back with the practicalities. What are we going to replace it with? Look, there are more plans on the table for, eliminating property taxes without hurting revenue than Carter's got little liver pills. Okay, that's just the reality of it. The plans exist. They ignore them, right? Whether it's TPPF's plan, right? That the one that was floating around 4 years ago that put us on an absolute path to property tax elimination, or one that we floated, which is the creation of a sovereign wealth fund here in Texas that doesn't eventually just end property tax, but ends all taxes on citizens of Texas, right? So the plans are there. They are willfully disregarding any plans dealing with the elimination of property taxes. And I'm going to tell you why. Because there are elements within the Texas government, particularly in the legislature, that profit off of property taxes. They make money. People say, how? Well, there's one senator in particular that owns a business that makes money. Its entire revenue model is based on you getting a tax bill that is jacked up too high and needing to negotiate it down. And you go to this person's company, they negotiate it down, and they get a cut of what they saved you. Okay, so you tell me that some of these people don't have an incentive to keep a property tax system in place. These jackals have come out after this session and said, look at us, we capped property taxes. They can't tax you. And yet, here we go. They didn't do anything about appraisals. So, okay, cool. They capped the rate, but then what they did was they set it up to where they'll just go in and jack your home appraisal up by double or whatever it is. And I don't know if you guys have heard this. I've still got to run this down. But it came from Terry Hall from TURF. I don't know if you guys remember Terry Hall or not. We need to get her on here, but she was at TEXIT. And Terry Hall said Kirk County, the county, one of the most impacted counties by these floods, because Kirk County was designated in a state of emergency, there's a law that said if the county increases property taxes more than 3.5%, it triggers an election by the people. They waited for this emergency declaration in Kirk County, which allowed them to bypass the vote, and they jacked it up 8%, right? So, I mean, they literally used the tragedy as an opportunity to unite the county commissioners court, according to Terry Hall, and I want to find out more about this, but according to the reports, they used the tragedy, the dead people, the dead children, the property devastation as an excuse to bypass a vote, the voter cap, the voter requirement, and jack up property taxes beyond the 3.5% to 8%. I mean, look, if this pans out, it is proof positive, yet again, one more log on the fire, that property taxes are immoral. And we got issues here with people that are in elected positions that absolutely need to be not in elected positions, right? That they got to go if they're going to do that. And I haven't seen sort of the backlash that I have expected from that. So, like I said, I'm going to do some digging, and maybe the T&M's going to raise a ruckus about that, because I got a real hard on for these kind of people, right? These people that want to use these tragedies to exploit people. And normally you would equate that to the Beto O'Rourke's of the world, who would, trip over the bodies of dead children to get a photo opportunity, right? Or some of these other politicians, Roland Gutierrez in the state Senate. I mean, that guy had video shorts up trying to capitalize on the tragedy, the flooding. I mean, like that. I mean, some of these people are just disgusting to me. They're just disgusting, and they're despicable, and they're evil. And they would trip over the bodies of dead children just to get a photo opportunity, or maybe they could squeak out a vote, or maybe dunk on another politician and get some, score some points or whatever. And you normally equate that to those guys that are in the Democratic Party, but this Kerr County thing, these county commissioners, they're all Republicans. And so I have to ask myself, what in the world is the Republican Party of Texas going to do to these people that are wearing their team jersey that would do something this heinous? What are they going to do? What disciplinary action will be coming down from the party if this pans out on these alleged people? Because look, they may be Republicans, but that is the most anti-Texan thing I've ever seen. When the rest of the state is coming together, everybody in Texas is banding together, help from every corner, so much so that you got to turn it away. And these guys say, cool, here's what we're going to do. Thanks for the help. Now we're going to tax you. That sounds like the mob. Property taxes make me very angry. Political exploitation of tragedy makes me angry. And here, my friends, we have a confluence of the two. How do we eliminate them? You get the legislation passed, or before you eliminate property taxes, the thing you got to do is eliminate politicians that don't support the elimination of property taxes. And we're in election season. Your opportunity is on the horizon. Find somebody who will pledge to eliminate property taxes, who will stick to that pledge, who will vote against every single other thing that is allegedly property tax. If it's not elimination, they won't participate. And they try to game these guys, and it's a sick game down there in Austin. I'm gonna tell you what, I empathize with Jack Nicholson's Joker in the Batman movie. Every time I think about Austin, I need one of those little party whistles, because when he says this town needs an enema, I know he was talking about Gotham, but I bet he was thinking about Austin. Okay. Okay. Good news. Alfred says that if the next election, if some of the country goes communist, I will help push independence for Texas. Hey, Alfred, newsflash, guess what? Some of the United States has already gone communist. So looking forward to seeing you at our next event. Looking forward to seeing you become a member of the TNM, because your criteria has been satisfied. Okay. Those are not questions. Thank you to everyone who said that you could not, you sent a message, said you couldn't make it or you'd be late. I appreciate that. Gerald asks, I'm wondering hypothetically if Texas had already achieved its independence, how our newly formed government would have handled this catastrophic occurrence. Something about the floods. The answer is exactly what we've done now, which is, look, this idea that the feds show up and do a bunch of miracles. Understand that the first people that are there are Texans, and I don't mean just the Texas Military Department or all of that, the State Guard, National Guard branches, DPS. I mean, we got every agency under the sun ready to rock and roll when these things happen. But it's average Texans, right? It's people like us that load up trucks and go down there, and individuals who volunteer for search and rescue. Our people are there at disaster areas before the feds ever show up. And anyone who has ever spent any significant time working disaster relief in Texas will tell you that the feds are more of a hindrance than they are a help. When FEMA shows up, it is the absolute biggest joke. And people are going to say, you know what, you're saying that to score political points. No, I'm saying that because we have firsthand experience. For those of you who don't know, I live on the coast of Texas. I mean, I live down here. We went through Hurricane Rita and Hurricane Ike. There's been plenty. So Hurricane Harvey dumped the absolute most rain, literally about 1.5 miles from my house, like literally right over here. That was the highest rainfall that was measured. Our neighborhood was an island for 10 days. Okay, so the bottom line here, people, is I'm not saying this. I'm just telling you from personal experience. When we had volunteers down in Sabine Pass after Hurricane Ike, mucking out houses and trying to do everything we could to help those people piece their lives back together, FEMA came down there and complicated everything. when people had food going bad and everything else, and there were trucks of donated ice in a parking lot of Ford Park in Beaumont, and they FEMA made them sit there with the ice in the refrigerator trucks until the ice was eventually no good, right? Couldn't do it, but they wouldn't let them distribute it because look, I want you to imagine for a moment, U.S. Postal Service, the VA, think about every bad experience you have ever had with federal government. Every bad experience. Bundle it all together, and that's FEMA. And I'm not just saying that because of who I am. I'm saying it because of what I've experienced. We ought to just get some people on just to tell their horror stories of dealing with FEMA and how they have screwed things up. But how would Texas have handled it, Gerald? Exactly like we're doing now, right? Because let's be honest, right now it's still Texans taking care of the 99.9% of the damage and the needs. And while we are super appreciative of help that has come in from outside, Texas is always going to step up in natural disasters and take care of their own. That's just the way that it is. Thank you for your question. Okay, so let me get over here before I bundle all these other ones up. Okay. I am for I am says, is there any TEXIT path that doesn't go through Austin? Not one that you want to explore. So there have been some that floated, well, you could have a county convention. And I actually talked about that in my very first book. And the reality is that from a lawful standpoint, counties exist as administrative subdivisions of the state. Okay, so people look at the county system in England and they want to talk about English common law, and I get that, but that's not how counties were created here in Texas. Counties were creations of the state as administrative subdivisions of the state. And it was the same in the Republic era too. Counties were created by the Republic of Texas. That's just the way that it is. Okay, so there's all these ideas about having a convention. I've talked about this before. Brian McClanahan, who I respect on most issues, I believe he is completely wrong about this because he talks about, all these states that left during, the 1860s, 1860, 1861 via convention. Texas had a convention, but what Brian fails to mention is the fact that ultimately the question was put to the voters of Texas. Regardless of what the convention said, the question was ultimately placed to the people of Texas. And the reason being is that principle entrenched in Article 1, Section 2 of the Texas Constitution right now, whose wording has existed in some shape, form, or fashion in every constitution that Texas has had since it gained its independence. And so, it is a reserved right of the people to alter, abolish, or reform the government in such manner as they may think expedient. And so, if you were going to go with some system that was outside of that, outside of the legislature doing it, it would ultimately have to be authorized by a popular vote, and that authorization by popular vote would ultimately come down to the legislature being able to put that, because there is no other mechanism. The problem that we have, the challenge, I'm not going to call it a problem, the challenge we have is we have the right under Article 1, Section 2, but we have no legal framework to exercise that right. And so we have to utilize the areas where we do have the power to exercise that right to be able to establish the framework for the full usage of that right, for it to be recognized. And so there's a whole lot more to this conversation. Obviously cannot get into it because I'm already 4 minutes over time. But unfortunately, Austin is the bottleneck. We have to run it through. You could run some unofficial plebiscites, some unofficial referendums, but at the end of the day, nothing has the power and the impact and the effect of a lawfully constituted vote on in or out. And that's a whole other topic for a whole other time. But thank you for the question. Okay. I'll take this one. Okay. Laughs often says, Daniel Miller, can we buy gold and silver to store in the Texas Conservatory? You mean the depository vault now? For when it becomes official that perhaps cards become available, prices are going up. Yeah, you can store there now. The Texas Precious Metal Depository, the Texas Bullion Depository, or as it's called sometimes the Texas Gold Depository, it's been open for a while, and there are already people storing there. A lot of the benefits for storing there is physical custody right here in Texas. The law that authorized the creation of the depository said that the state must fight against any and will not allow any confiscation of that gold, whatever you store there. So that law, and I'd have to go pull it specifically, but it was really talking about a repeat of what FDR did back in the 30s, which is went and outlawed the possession of gold. The state in the law that authorizes this basically is sticking the middle finger to the federal government. Says you try that crap here again, and we got problems. So we're not going to honor it. So it makes it very attractive from that standpoint. But look, I would just encourage you to search out Texas Gold Depository, Texas Bullion Depository. It's in Leander. Got a website, explains everything they do. I'm not here selling for them, right? That's not my job. It's a state-run situation, but that's where you would go check that out. And yes, you can absolutely do it now. Okay, so this gets me to the big bushel basket full of questions. So for some weird reason today, a lot of the emails that came in about Social Security and federal pension benefits. Now, I actually answered last week a question on federal pension benefits, but I must say that this has been the largest surge of questions about Social Security that I have gotten in quite some time. I think there's, I don't know, about a half dozen in here or something like that. It was a lot of Social Security questions. And, what's going to happen? So, this is what I want to do. Rather than answer it for the, you know, I cannot even begin to count how many times I've answered this question. I'm gonna just recap a little bit something that I said last week, which is the thing you should be concerned about related to Social Security is its impending bankruptcy. I even showed a headline on Late Night Coffee Talk where they're projecting what they've moved it to 2031, 2032, the projected insolvency date for the Social Security Trust Fund. I went through and have answered previously what federal law is, right? What their existing policy is about federal pension benefits, which include Social Security. But understand that so many of these answers, like for questions like that we get a lot, they already, the answers to those already exist. And I'm going to just encourage you to let me just show you, right? So there's a great place where you can go and find these answers. And it's right here. It's at TEXIT now. Let me add that bad boy right there. And there we go. Matter of fact, let me just make that the full screen. There we go. So, there it is. This is the website. It's texitnow.org. And you go there and you get, here's the TEXIT FAQs. You want to know about Social Security, social. Look at that. Search. It's looking because you can only imagine how many articles we have on here about Social Security. You know what? I'm not even going to wait for it. I'm just going to go here. There's the currency question answered. There's the federal debt question, how the economy is going to be. And let's go here. Travel, sports, life. There we go. Health and social services. What will happen to people who rely on Medicare after TEXIT? What could replace Social Security in independent Texas? How will TEXIT affect Social Security recipients? What about veterans benefits after TEXIT, right? How will Texas handle natural disasters without FEMA? So, here it is, texitnow.org, all of these questions answered, and look, if it's not there, there's a place that you can even submit your question, right? You can submit an additional question. We do things like this on nights like this for late night coffee talk. So if there's an answer that's already out, sometimes I'll take it and I'll answer it again. But this one I answered last week, and a lot of these tonight that came in, they were answered previously and recently, and we want to give other people an opportunity to dive deeper on some of these issues, and particularly when so many of these fundamental TEXIT questions are answered there. Additionally, look, we have deep analysis articles on the Texian Partisan, right? Go to texianpartisan.com, and you can read those. So there's a lot of this information in the constellation of websites that we have, and they're all easily accessible from tnm.me. And so you can go find pretty much anything you want to find, starting there as your jump off point. Okay. Let's see. Did we have another one? No. I think we cleared the board tonight. So with that makes me super happy. I'm glad there was a lot. But look, I want to take this opportunity to thank our YouTube channel members. They are the ones who help keep this thing moving. Plus the people who just donate to the organization, right? With the new platform, there's plenty of ways to thank you guys. But I would encourage you to, either become a channel member, get your name posted up here, or you have it's right there. Like literally, if you're watching on YouTube, the button's there. So you just click it, you become a channel member. It's like $2 or $3. I mean, it's small, right? But every bit helps us continue to produce the content and get the word out for Texans, right? You want Texas to become an independent nation. And because of you, these things happen, right? These videos get produced, legislators get communicated with, and campaigns get launched and run, and training happens, and legislation gets drafted and passed. And, it's you. You are the ones that are making this happen. You that are listed here, and you that go over to tnm.me/donate and donate to the cause, right? Or donate.tnm.me. It's going to take you to the same place, right? But you are the ones that are making this happen. We're here to help you. We're here to facilitate that and organize that and do those things. But it's you those of you that are participating, it's you that's doing this. And so I can't thank you all enough for what you're doing to help support the cause of Texas independence and bring our collective dream, our collective vision of independence come to pass. Look, if you're joining us for the first time and you've not done this, tonight is your night. Be sure to pledge your support for what we do. This is absolutely no cost whatsoever. But head over to tnm.me/vote, get you signed up so you get notifications from us. You get, important news and information, but more importantly, it lets us know that you stand with us, right? That you share the same vision as everyone else in the TNM. And so head over to tnm.me/vote to make that happen. And just a reminder, if you have not downloaded the TNM, if you're already registered, you've registered your support, we automatically create you an account on our on TNM Social, right? Our own internal social network, just for supporters of Texas independence, the like-minded of the like-minded. And so when you do that, when you register your support, you go to tnm.me/app, which is increasingly becoming the way that most of you are getting notifications from us. As big tech drops our emails in spam boxes, or notifications don't go out on some of these platforms, social media still spikes our posts. This is the way that you guys get notified of important things that are happening in the organization, and stay connected to one another, because at the end of the day, that's us. We have to stay connected with one another. It really sucks for people to feel like they're alone. And if you want to know the greatest way to combat that self-doubt that I talked about whether this can be done, there is a marked difference between those people who stay isolated from the organization and others in the organization, and those that are plugged in. The level of excitement and joy and just enthusiasm, that gap is as big as the Grand Canyon between those that isolate themselves and those that come in and spend time and work together with those who are like-minded. So be sure to do that. tnm.me/app. Get that thing downloaded. All right, friends. I went over time. That's okay. I thought I was going to cut it short because my head is screaming, but apparently the ibuprofen did its job, at least enough for me to get through all of your questions. I want to thank you all so very much for joining us tonight. Definitely looking forward to next week. This is going to be fun. So we've got a lot of things that we're working on, and some of you will be getting some phone calls about those, and you know who you are. But we'll keep everyone posted on all of our official channels. A final reminder, be sure to like and subscribe and share whatever platform you are watching this on, whether it's the live or the replay, whichever one. Be sure to spread the word. We need all hands on deck. For us to make Texas a self-governing independent nation, it's going to count on you. And part of doing part of helping us help you is helping spread that word to the people that you know, to build those relationships, to share with them the information that is so critical to the future of Texas. And so, friends, with that, I will leave you with the words I leave you with every time we're together. They're not my words. They're the words of Sam Houston when he said that Texas will again lift its head and stand among the nations. I believe that time is now, and the question is, will you stand with her? Good night, everyone.
In power, whether red or blue, I could not care less about Texas, me and you. They created this give me country that don't value hard work. For a Texan to survive, all we need are some seeds and dirt. Texan rise, don't you hear your call? Got to save your country for it's long gone. Texan rise, don't you hear your call? Got to save your country for it's long gone. We believe in family and we value our community. Gladly lend a helping hand to a neighbor in need. And we don't believe that government should provide for all of society's needs. No, it's the pride of a Texan to give to others voluntarily. Texan rise, don't you hear your call? Gotta save your country.